The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species gathered for what many believed would be their final meeting. The massive holographic display at the center showed a grim reality, red markers indicating fallen worlds, stretching across 3 entire spiral arms of the galaxy. Each marker represented billions of lives lost to the advancing void swarm. Admiral Kethler of the Zenthari Empire stood at the podium, his 6 arms gesturing frantically as he addressed the assembly. His people were known throughout the galaxy as master strategists, having never lost a war in their 3,000-year history. Today, however, his voice carried the weight of desperation. Honored delegates, the situation has become critical beyond all projections. The swarm has consumed 47 star systems in the past month alone. Our combined fleets, representing the military might of 37 civilizations, have achieved nothing more than slowing their advance by mere days. A ripple of fear passed through the chamber. The void swarm wasn't just another enemy, they were something beyond conventional understanding. These beings consumed all biological matter they encountered, converting it into more of their kind. Worse, they seemed to adapt to every weapon, every strategy, every defensive measure the galaxy could devise. Chancellor Vex of the Crystal Communion spoke next, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. The mathematical models are clear. At their current rate of expansion, the swarm will reach the galactic core within 18 months. We estimate total galactic consumption within 4 years. The chamber fell silent, 4 years to the end of everything. Commander Yathara of the Aquatic Republics raised her tentacled appendage. What of the forbidden sectors, the quarantined regions where primitive species still dwell? Admiral Kethler's expression darkened. The primitive sectors have been sealed for good reason. Those species lack the technological development to pose any threat to advanced civilizations. Most haven't even achieved faster-than-light travel. Opening those sectors would only provide more biomass for the swarm. But surely some of them might offer unique perspectives, pressed Yathara. The ancient texts speak of unconventional warfare methods employed by less developed species. A harsh laugh echoed from the draconian representative, General Scalex. His reptilian features twisted into a sneer. You speak of primitives as if they could succeed where we have failed. These species fight with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. They know nothing of plasma fields, quantum disruptors, or dimensional warfare. What could such backward creatures possibly contribute? The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion remained unchanged. The galaxy's greatest military minds, supported by technologies beyond imagination, had failed. Hope was a luxury none could afford. Yet unknown to the Council, their conversation was being monitored from a small, unremarkable station hidden in the asteroid belt of a yellow star system designated only as Sector 7G, Sol System. The inhabitants of the third planet from that star had been under observation for decades, classified as a developing species, and strictly quarantined from galactic civilization. Dr. Sarah Chen, chief xenobiologist at the monitoring station, turned away from the surveillance feed with a heavy heart. She was one of only 12 humans who knew about the greater galaxy, part of a secret research team tasked with studying alien civilizations while maintaining Earth's isolation. They're going to die, she whispered to her colleague, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez. Trillions of beings across the galaxy, and they don't even know we exist. Marcus nodded grimly. Their orders were clear: maintain the quarantine at all costs. Humanity was deemed too primitive, too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted with galactic citizenship. The decision had been made centuries ago, after the first scout ships observed human behavior during what they called the World Wars. Sarah, you can't be thinking what I think you're thinking, Marcus said, recognizing the look in her eyes. She was already pulling up her communication array. The Council needs to know there are other options. Maybe we can't fight this swarm directly, but we can at least warn Earth to prepare. The protocols assume there's a galaxy left to protect. Sarah's fingers flew across the controls. Marcus, I've studied 47 different species over the past 20 years. You know what I've never seen? Anything like what humans do when their backs are against the wall. As Sarah composed her message, she thought about the reports she'd filed over the years. The way humans adapted to impossible situations. How they turned disasters into opportunities. The stubborn refusal to surrender even when defeat was mathematically certain. The other species of the galaxy had evolved into stable, predictable patterns. The Zenthari were strategists but rigid in their thinking. The Crystal Communion could calculate probabilities but struggled with improvisation. The aquatic republics excelled at cooperation but faltered when faced with truly alien concepts. Humans were different. They thrived on chaos. They embraced the impossible. They had a saying that Sarah had included in her reports but that the galactic authorities had dismissed as primitive bravado. Fortune favors the bold. Her message was simple. Request immediate emergency session. New data regarding potential swarm countermeasures. Species designation, Sol 3 humans. Recommend immediate evaluation for emergency conscription. She hesitated for just a moment before hitting send. Once this message reached the Council, there would be no going back. Humanity would either rise to face the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known, or they would be consumed along with everyone else. The response came faster than expected. Within hours, Admiral Kethler himself was en route to the Sol system, accompanied by a small task force of the galaxy's most advanced ships. Sarah had expected skepticism, even ridicule. Instead, she found desperation. When the Admiral's ship, a kilometer-long vessel that looked more like a crystal cathedral than a warship, entered Earth's orbit, Sarah felt her heart racing. Through the viewports of the monitoring station, she could see the ships maintaining position just beyond Luna, their stealth fields keeping them invisible to Earth's primitive detection systems. Admiral Kethler materialized in the station's conference room through quantum teleportation, his imposing figure immediately dominating the space. Up close, Sarah could see the stress etched into his alien features. This was a being who had commanded fleets across the galaxy, and now he was grasping at straws. Dr. Chen, his voice resonated with harmonics that human ears could barely process. Your message spoke of countermeasures. I trust you understand the gravity of false hope in our current situation. Sarah straightened her shoulders. Admiral, I've spent 20 years studying the species on that planet below. I've watched them face extinction-level events and not just survive, but emerge stronger. They have something I've never observed in any other species. And what is that? They don't know how to give up. The Admiral's expression remained skeptical. Dr. Chen, we face an enemy that has consumed civilizations with technologies beyond your people's comprehension. Your species still fights with chemical explosives. They have not even mastered fusion power consistently. What could they possibly? Admiral, Sarah interrupted, calling up a holographic display. Let me show you something. The display flickered to life, showing footage from Earth's history. Battles where outnumbered forces had achieved impossible victories. Innovations born from desperation. Stories of individuals who had changed the course of entire wars through sheer determination. This is the Battle of Thermopylae, Sarah began, showing ancient Greek warriors facing overwhelming odds. 300 soldiers held off an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die, but they fought anyway. She changed the display. This is the Doolittle Raid. 80 men in obsolete aircraft launched an attack against an enemy that had never been touched by war. It was militarily insignificant, but it changed the entire psychology of a conflict. Another change. This is Apollo 13. When their spacecraft was crippled in the vacuum of space, they didn't calculate the odds of survival. They improvised, adapted, and brought 3 men home with technology your people would consider primitive toys. Admiral Kethler watched in silence, his multiple eyes processing the information. These are isolated incidents. No, Admiral, these are examples of what humans call ordinary heroism. It's not isolated. It's fundamental to who they are. Sarah pulled up more recent footage. Firefighters running into burning buildings while others fled. Medical workers fighting pandemics without adequate protection. Scientists working around the clock to solve problems that had never been solved before. Every species in your galaxy has evolved to avoid unnecessary risks. Survival of the cautious, but humans. They run toward danger when it threatens something they care about. They don't calculate odds. They don't wait for optimal conditions. They act. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Chen, even if what you say is true, your species lacks the technology to pose any threat to the swarm. Their ships, their weapons. Admiral, have you considered that maybe advanced technology isn't the answer? Your people have thrown everything they have at this enemy. Quantum weapons, dimensional disruptors, planet-killing devices. Nothing works because you're fighting them on their terms with their rules. Sarah leaned forward, her voice intense. Humans don't follow rules when the stakes are high enough. They cheat, they improvise, they find ways to win that nobody else would even consider. She called up one final display. This is what happened when my people faced an enemy they couldn't defeat through conventional means. They didn't build better weapons. They changed the nature of warfare itself. The footage showed the development of asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, psychological operations. Methods that had never been theoretically optimal but had proven devastatingly effective in practice. Your Void Swarm adapts to every weapon, every strategy your people use, but adaptation requires patterns. Humans specialize in breaking patterns. They do things that don't make sense until suddenly they do. Admiral Kethler stood silent for several minutes, his tactical mind processing possibilities he had never considered. Finally, he spoke. Dr. Chen, if I were to hypothetically consider your proposal, what exactly are you suggesting? Sarah's heart pounded. Contact them, tell them the truth, give them a chance to prove what they can do. And if they fail, if they are consumed by the swarm like so many others, then we're no worse off than we are now. But Admiral, what if they don't fail? What if everything your people know about warfare is incomplete? What if the solution to your impossible problem is sitting right here on a planet you've written off as too primitive to matter? The Admiral turned toward the viewport, looking down at the blue-green world below. Somewhere on that planet's surface, 8 billion humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that the fate of the galaxy might rest in their hands. Dr. Chen, you're asking me to violate every protocol, every safety measure, every law governing contact with primitive species. Yes, I am. You're asking me to risk exposing a quarantined world to dangers they cannot comprehend. Yes, I am. You're asking me to place the hopes of trillions of beings on a species that has never faced anything beyond their own planetary conflicts. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Admiral, you came here because you're out of options. Your greatest strategists, your most advanced weapons, your combined fleets, they've all failed. So yes, I'm asking you to try something impossible, because impossible is what humans do best. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then, almost to himself, he whispered, "Fortune favors the bold." Sarah's eyes widened. You know that phrase. It appeared in your reports, a human concept that our translators rendered as probability manipulation through aggressive action. Most council members dismissed it as primitive superstition. And what do you think? Admiral Kethler turned back to her, and for the first time since his arrival, Sarah saw something besides desperation in his expression. She saw hope. Dr. Chen, prepare your communication arrays. It's time to break the quarantine. As Sarah's hands flew over the controls, setting up humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization, she couldn't help but smile. The galaxy was about to meet a species that had turned stubbornness into an art form, that had made careers out of proving experts wrong, that had built their entire civilization on the principle that any problem could be solved if you were willing to think differently enough. The Void Swarm had consumed dozens of civilizations by adapting to their strategies and technologies, but they had never faced humans. They had never faced a species whose first response to impossible odds was to ask, "Yeah, watch this." The first transmission to Earth would go out within the hour, and with it, the galaxy's last, desperate hope for survival would rest in the hands of a species that specialized in doing exactly what no sane being would attempt. Admiral Kethler just hoped that desperation would prove to be enough to bridge the gap between human audacity and galactic survival. Because if it wasn't, then the greatest military minds in the galaxy had just made their final mistake. But as he watched Dr. Chen work with the focused intensity he had observed in her historical footage, the Admiral found himself believing something he hadn't felt in months. Maybe, just maybe, this impossible plan might actually work. President Elena Vasquez stared at the impossible sight filling the main screen in the White House Situation Room. 3 massive alien spacecraft hung motionless above Earth's major population centers, their sleek forms unlike anything in human imagination. After 72 hours of global panic, communication attempts, and military mobilization, the aliens had finally responded to humanity's frantic signals. The being that materialized as a hologram in the center of the room defied easy description. Admiral Kethler stood nearly 3 meters tall, his 6 arms moving in precise, calculated gestures as he spoke. His voice resonated through translation devices that rendered his words in perfect English, though the underlying harmonics suggested something far more complex. President Vasquez, I am Admiral Kethler of the Zenthari Empire, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. I must begin with an apology. Your species has been under observation for several centuries, but Council protocol has prevented direct contact until now. Alina felt her mouth go dry. Around the table sat the world's most powerful leaders, connected via quantum-encrypted links. General Harrison Matthews, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward intently. Dr. Rebecca Foster, the world's leading astrophysicist, was frantically taking notes. Every person in the room understood they were witnessing the most significant moment in human history. Admiral Alina managed, "Why are you making contact now?" The alien's expression darkened. "Because, President Vasquez, your galaxy is dying." The next hour forever changed humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. Admiral Kethler explained the Galactic Council, the 47 civilizations that had cooperated for millennia. He described technologies that bent the laws of physics, weapons that could crack planets, defensive systems that manipulated space-time itself. Then he told them about the Void Swarm. "The enemy we face is unlike anything in recorded galactic history," Admiral Kethler continued, as holographic displays showed the devastation across distant star systems. "They consume all biological matter, converting it into additional units of their collective. They adapt to every weapon we deploy, every strategy we attempt." General Matthews interrupted. "Admiral, with respect, if you have technology beyond our comprehension and you can't stop them, what exactly do you expect us to do?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Admiral Kethler's multiple eyes focused on the general with something that might have been respect. "General Matthews, that is precisely why we are here. Our advanced civilizations have become predictable. We follow logical patterns, optimal strategies, calculated risks. The swarm has learned to counter all of these approaches." Dr. Foster spoke up. "You're saying that being more advanced has actually become a disadvantage?" "In this specific case, yes. Dr. Chen, our xenobiologist who has observed your species, believes that humanity possesses certain traits that might prove effective against an enemy that adapts to conventional warfare." Alina felt a chill. "You want to use us as weapons?" "No, President Vasquez. We want to partner with you, but I must be completely honest about what that partnership would entail." The Admiral gestured, and the holographic display changed to show strategic maps of the galaxy. The swarm is currently 18 months from reaching the galactic core. Every major civilization has contributed their finest military assets to our combined defense force. We estimate that our current strategies will delay them by perhaps 6 additional months. "And then," Alina asked, though she dreaded the answer, "then everything dies. Every world, every species, every trace of civilization in this galaxy will be consumed." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of electronic equipment. Alina looked around the table at faces reflecting her own thoughts. Terror, disbelief, and underneath it all, a growing sense of determination that she recognized as uniquely human. "Admiral," General Matthews said slowly, "what exactly are you proposing?" "We want to offer humanity immediate technological advancement. Faster-than-light travel, advanced weapons systems, defensive technologies that would normally take your species millennia to develop. In exchange, you would contribute your military forces to the galactic defense." Dr. Foster laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Our military forces? Admiral, we're talking about ships that barely make it to Mars. Our most advanced weapons are chemical explosives attached to metal rockets. What possible contribution could we make to a galactic war?" Admiral Kethler's expression shifted, and for the first time, Alina detected something like hope in the alien's demeanor. "Dr. Foster, may I share something that our greatest military strategists discovered only recently? In 47 documented encounters with the Void Swarm, every engagement has followed predictable patterns. They adapt, we counteradapt, they adapt again, until they overwhelm us through superior numbers and processing speed." The Admiral paused. "But adaptation requires recognizable patterns. Your species excels at creating patterns that defy logic, that appear random until they achieve objectives that should be impossible. Elena leaned back in her chair. You want us because we're chaotic. Not chaotic, President Vasquez. Creative in ways that appear chaotic to ordered minds. Dr. Chen showed me historical examples. Your species consistently achieves military objectives through methods that violate every principle of optimal strategy. General Matthews couldn't help but grin. Admiral, are you saying we're too crazy for this enemy to figure out? In more diplomatic terms, yes. The debate that followed lasted 6 hours and involved every major world leader. Some argued for caution, for learning more about this galactic civilization before committing to anything. Others pushed for immediate action, recognizing that 18 months was barely enough time to prepare for a war beyond imagination. Elena found herself thinking about her daughter, about the 8 billion people going about their lives while their planet hung at the center of an impossible decision. Finally, she called for silence. Admiral Kethler, if we agree to this partnership, what exactly would you need from us? Initially, volunteers for a rapid training program. We would need military personnel willing to learn technologies centuries beyond your current capabilities. We would need strategists willing to think in ways that might seem illogical. And we would need leaders willing to command forces in battles that will determine the survival of trillions. Elena turned to General Matthews. How many volunteers do you think we could get? The general's expression was grim. Ma'am, if we explain what's at stake, every available service member plus millions of civilians who understand what extinction means. Dr. Foster raised her hand. Admiral, there's something I need to understand. You're offering us technology that would advance our civilization by centuries. What guarantees do you have that we won't use these advances against other human nations or against your own civilizations? Admiral Kethler's laugh was a complex harmonic that the translation system rendered as bitter amusement. Dr. Foster, if we fail in the next 18 months, there will be no civilizations left to threaten. And frankly, after studying your species for decades, our xenobiologists believe that humans facing an existential threat are far more likely to unite than to fight among themselves. Elena looked around the room one more time. Every leader present understood the magnitude of the choice before them. Accept the partnership and potentially save the galaxy, or refuse and watch their world die along with everything else. Admiral, she said finally, how quickly can we begin? The transformation began immediately. Within days, massive alien vessels appeared in Earth's orbit, their cargo holds filled with technologies that human scientists could barely comprehend. Faster-than-light communication arrays allowed instant contact with the Galactic Defense Network. Manufacturing facilities capable of producing advanced materials were constructed in Earth's asteroid belt. Training centers equipped with virtual reality systems beyond human imagination were built on the moon's far side. But the real change was in the humans themselves. Captain Sarah Mitchell had commanded a Navy destroyer for 8 years, but nothing in her experience prepared her for stepping aboard a Zenthari cruiser. The ship was a kilometer long and seemed to exist in more dimensions than human senses could process. Surfaces shifted and flowed like liquid metal, responding to thought as much as touch. The neural interface will feel strange at first, explained her Zenthari instructor, a being called Shipsinger Velter. Your species' brains function differently than ours. Where we process information in parallel streams, you seem to work in chaotic bursts that somehow achieve coherent results. Sarah felt the interface crown settle over her head, and suddenly she could sense the entire ship around her. Power flows, structural integrity, weapons systems, navigation, all of it became as familiar as her own heartbeat. But more than that, she could feel the ship's potential, the ways it could move and fight that its original designers had never considered. Shipsinger, she said slowly, this vessel has 17 different weapon systems, but they're all designed to work independently. Yes, Captain Mitchell, each system is optimized for specific tactical situations. Sarah's mind was already racing ahead, seeing possibilities that made her grin. What if they weren't independent? What if we linked them in ways that aren't optimal? Velter's expression showed confusion. Captain, that would reduce the efficiency of each individual system. But it might create effects that no one would expect, Sarah replied. Shipsinger, show me the weapons targeting protocols. Meanwhile, in a training facility on Luna, Colonel Marcus Rodriguez was discovering that human tactical thinking translated poorly into galactic standard procedures. His instructor, a crystal-based being called Shard General Kirix, grew increasingly frustrated as Marcus consistently ignored optimal strategies. Colonel Rodriguez, the simulation clearly shows that a frontal assault on the swarm position would result in 93% casualties. The optimal approach is a flanking maneuver supported by long-range bombardment. Marcus studied the holographic battlefield, seeing something that made his experienced infantry mind rebel against the suggested tactics. General Kirix, what if optimal isn't the goal? Colonel, I do not understand. Look at this position. The swarm expects us to be logical, right? They adapt based on what makes tactical sense. But what if we did something that makes no tactical sense but achieves the strategic objective anyway? Marcus began manipulating the simulation controls, designing an assault that violated every principle of military science. Instead of avoiding the enemy's strengths, he attacked directly into them. Instead of preserving forces, he committed everything to simultaneous actions that should have been sequential. Colonel, this plan has a projected casualty rate of 60%, with only a 14% chance of success. But what are the odds that the swarm will adapt to it in time to matter? Shard General Kirix ran the calculations. The pattern is so illogical that their adaptation algorithms would require 17 simulation cycles to achieve countermeasures. Marcus grinned. General, in 17 cycles will have already won or lost, that's the point. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, similar scenes played out thousands of times. Human volunteers absorbed technologies that should have taken decades to understand, then immediately began using those technologies in ways their creators had never imagined. Dr. Amanda Torres, a physicist from MIT, found herself working alongside Aquatic Republic engineers on defensive systems. The aliens had designed perfect force fields that could stop any known weapon. Amanda took one look at their specifications and started laughing. Dr. Torres, questioned engineer Fluxinger Zith, do our defensive systems amuse you? No, sorry, Amanda replied, wiping tears from her eyes. It's just that you've built the perfect defense against known weapons, but humans specialize in unknown weapons. She began pulling up her own calculations. What if instead of stopping attacks, we redirected them? What if we made the enemy's weapons work for us? Within hours, Amanda had designed modifications that turned defensive fields into offensive weapons, using the enemy's own force against them. The concept was so counterintuitive that the alien engineers required days to understand how it could possibly work. But perhaps the most significant development occurred in the command centers, where human leaders met their galactic counterparts to plan strategy for a war that would determine the fate of everything. Admiral Kethler found himself in lengthy discussions with General Harrison Matthews, trying to explain the tactical situation across 17 different star systems. What should have been a simple briefing turned into an education in the fundamental differences between human and galactic military thought. General Matthews, the enemy has established defensive positions in these systems, Admiral Kethler explained, highlighting star maps with precision. Our analysis indicates that we must neutralize them in sequence to prevent them from reinforcing each other. General Matthews studied the display for several minutes. Admiral, how many times have galactic forces attacked in sequence like this? It is the optimal strategy. We always attack in logical sequence to maximize force effectiveness. Right, and this swarm adapts to optimal strategies. So what happens if we attack all 17 positions simultaneously? Admiral Kethler's multiple eyes widened. General, that would spread our forces too thin. We would lack the concentration necessary to guarantee success at any individual target. But we might achieve success at targets they're not prepared to defend. Admiral, you said this enemy adapts based on patterns. Sequential attacks are a pattern. Simultaneous attacks across 17 targets isn't a pattern, it's chaos. General, the casualty projections. Admiral, what are the casualty projections if we lose this war? The question silenced the alien commander. For the first time since the crisis began, Admiral Kethler found himself considering strategies that violated every principle he had learned in centuries of military service. And to his surprise, they made a terrible kind of sense. As the weeks passed and training intensified, something remarkable began happening. Human volunteers weren't just learning to use alien technology, they were improving it, not through superior engineering or advanced science, but through approaches so unconventional that they achieved results no one had thought possible. The first successful test came during a simulated battle scenario. A mixed force of human and alien vessels faced off against a computer-generated swarm fleet programmed with all known adaptation algorithms. The galactic forces followed optimal tactics, achieving exactly the results their models predicted: total defeat. Then the humans took command. Captain Sarah Mitchell, now commanding a hybrid human-alien crew aboard a modified Zenthari cruiser, opened communication channels to the entire test fleet. All vessels, this is Defiant. Forget everything you learned about optimal tactics. Today we're going to do something stupid. What followed defied every principle of space combat doctrine. Ships broke formation to attack individual targets. Weapons were used in combinations that reduced their efficiency but created unexpected effects. Defensive systems were modified in real time to serve offensive purposes. The swarm simulation, programmed to adapt to logical patterns, found itself facing attacks that followed no pattern at all. Each time its algorithms began to recognize a strategy, the human forces changed to something completely different. Not better, different. When the simulation ended, the results screen showed something that no galactic military leader had seen in months: complete victory with minimal casualties. Admiral Kethler stared at the results for a long time. "How?" he finally asked. General Matthews smiled. "Admiral, you said this enemy adapts to patterns, so we made sure we didn't have any patterns. But the inefficiencies, the suboptimal resource allocation." "Admiral," Captain Mitchell interrupted, "optimal strategies are only optimal if they work. If the enemy can predict and counter optimal, then optimal becomes the worst possible choice." For the first time since the crisis began, Admiral Kethler felt something he had almost forgotten: confidence. Not the calculated confidence that came from superior numbers or technology, but the irrational confidence that emerged from having options the enemy couldn't predict. "Dr. Chen," he said to the xenobiologist who had started this impossible partnership, "I believe your assessment was correct." Dr. Chen smiled. "Admiral, you haven't seen anything yet. That was just the warm-up. Wait until you see what humans do when they get angry." As the first month of partnership drew to a close, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. The swarm's advance had slowed, then stopped entirely in 3 sectors where advanced human-alien teams had engaged them using the new tactics. For the first time in the war, the enemy seemed confused, uncertain, reactive instead of proactive. The impossible was beginning to look merely improbable. And improbable, as any human could have told the galaxy, was just another word for possible but interesting. Admiral Kethler prepared his first report to the Galactic Council with feelings he couldn't quite categorize. Hope, certainly. Relief, perhaps. But underneath it all was something that human observers would have recognized immediately: excitement. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Kethler had no idea what was going to happen next. And he was beginning to understand that uncertainty might be the galaxy's greatest weapon. The Void Swarm had never experienced confusion before. For millennia, they had swept across galaxies with the relentless efficiency of a natural disaster. Their collective intelligence processed thousands of variables simultaneously, adapting to every weapon, countering every strategy, evolving beyond every defense their enemies could devise. Now, for the first time in their species' existence, they were encountering patterns that made no sense. The hive mind, designated as Nexus Prime, floated in the void between stars, its massive form pulsing with bioluminescent communications as it received reports from across 17 different battle zones. Each report contained the same impossible information. Their forces were losing engagements they should have won easily. In the Kepler sector, a human commander called Rodriguez had launched a frontal assault against a position that should have been impregnable. Instead of the logical flanking maneuvers or siege tactics that the swarm had prepared countermeasures for, the human forces had simply attacked the strongest point with overwhelming aggression. The casualties had been severe, but the position had fallen in 6 hours instead of the projected 6 weeks. In the Vega system, a human named Mitchell had turned defensive battles into offensive victories by using weapons in combinations that reduced their individual effectiveness, but created results no algorithm could predict. When the swarm adapted to counter the new weapon combinations, the humans simply switched to different inefficient combinations. Most disturbing of all was the report from the Centauri front, where human forces had begun modifying their equipment during active combat. Not repairs or optimization, but fundamental changes to how their weapons and defenses functioned. The swarm's adaptation protocols required stable patterns to analyze, but these humans seemed incapable of using the same approach twice. Nexus Prime sent a pulse of inquiry to its subordinate nodes, requesting analysis and projections. The response came back as a harmonic of uncertainty that the hive mind had never experienced before. The humans were not following any recognizable pattern of warfare. They were not optimizing for efficiency, not maximizing their technological advantages, not employing any strategy that aligned with the behavioral models the swarm had developed for advanced civilizations. More troubling still, the human forces seemed to inspire similar unpredictability in their alien allies. Zenthari commanders who had followed strict tactical doctrines for centuries were suddenly experimenting with chaotic assault patterns. Aquatic Republic flotillas were abandoning their precisely coordinated formations in favor of improvisational attacks. The entire Galactic Defense Force was becoming random. Nexus Prime initiated a deep analysis protocol, dedicating substantial processing power to understanding this new threat. What it discovered challenged everything the swarm understood about warfare and evolution. The humans were not trying to be unpredictable. They were naturally unpredictable. Their neural patterns showed constant variation. Their decision-making processes included emotional variables that served no logical purpose, and their command structures seemed to encourage initiative rather than obedience. Most alien species had evolved past such chaotic thinking millennia ago. The Zenthari had perfected strategic calculation. The Crystal Communion had eliminated emotional interference from decision-making. The Aquatic Republics had achieved perfect coordination through shared consciousness. Humans had evolved none of these advantages. Instead, they had retained what other species considered primitive traits: aggression, stubbornness, the tendency to take risks that offered no logical benefit. For the first time in its existence, Nexus Prime encountered a problem it could not solve through adaptation. How does one adapt to an enemy that has no fixed characteristics to adapt to? Meanwhile, aboard the human command vessel Terra's Fury, Admiral Elena Santos was experiencing the opposite of confusion. For the first time since joining the Galactic Defense Force, everything was starting to make perfect sense. Elena had spent 20 years in the Earth's Navy before first contact, working her way up through commands that required constant improvisation with limited resources. When Admiral Kethler offered her command of the Galactic Defense Force's new Experimental Tactics Division, she had accepted knowing that her approach to warfare would seem insane to alien allies. She hadn't expected it to work this well. "Admiral," reported Captain Chen, her tactical officer, "we're receiving confirmation from all 17 fronts. The swarm has completely halted their advance in every sector where human forces are deployed." Elena studied the holographic battle displays surrounding her command chair. Each screen showed a different star system where human-led forces were engaging the enemy using tactics that would have got her court-martialed back on Earth. Simultaneous attacks without coordination. Resource allocation that ignored efficiency in favor of surprise. Combined operations that violated every principle of joint command structure. Any word from the Galactic Council? Admiral Kethler reports that Council members are... Captain Chen paused, consulting his notes, struggling to comprehend our success rates. Apparently, our casualty projections versus actual results are so different from their models that they're questioning whether we're reporting accurate numbers. Elena laughed. "Tell the Admiral that our numbers are accurate, we're just not measuring the same things they are." The fundamental difference, Elena had realized, was that galactic military doctrine focused on optimization. Every decision was designed to maximize efficiency, minimize casualties, and achieve objectives with the least possible resource expenditure. It was logical, scientific, and completely predictable. Human military doctrine, especially when facing impossible odds, focused on winning. Everything else was secondary. When Captain Rodriguez had launched his frontal assault in the Kepler sector, the Zenthari advisors had calculated a 60% casualty rate. Rodriguez had accepted those casualties as the price of victory, then achieved the objective with 30% casualties because the enemy hadn't expected anyone to choose such an obviously suboptimal approach. When Captain Mitchell had modified her ship's weapons during combat, her aquatic Republic engineers had protested that the modifications would reduce the weapon's effectiveness by 12%. Mitchell had pointed out that a 12% reduction in effectiveness that the enemy couldn't counter was infinitely more valuable than 100% effectiveness that they could. The aliens were beginning to understand that optimization was only optimal when facing a logical enemy. Admiral, Captain Chen continued, we're also receiving reports that several human-commanded vessels are achieving results that their alien crews consider impossible. Elena raised an eyebrow. Impossible how? They're exceeding the design performance parameters of their equipment. Chief Engineer Martinez on the destroyer Audacious has somehow increased his ship's power output by 18% without any hardware modifications. The Zenthari engineers say it should be physically impossible. Elena grinned. Let me guess, Martinez told them that impossible just means nobody's figured out how to do it yet. Those were his exact words, Admiral. This was something Elena had tried to explain to Admiral Kethler during their strategy sessions. Human technology had developed under resource constraints that forced constant improvisation. When a human engineer said a device was rated for a specific performance level, that meant it would work reliably at that level indefinitely. It didn't mean the device couldn't exceed that level when circumstances required it. Alien technology, developed by civilizations with abundant resources, was designed to precise specifications. When they said a device would perform at a certain level, they meant it would perform exactly at that level, no more and no less. The difference was that humans built things expecting them to break, so they designed them to be fixable and modifiable. Aliens built things expecting them to work perfectly, so they designed them to be reliable and unchangeable. Admiral, incoming priority transmission from Admiral Kethler. Elena straightened as the holographic projector activated, showing the Zenthari Admiral's imposing figure. Even across the quantum communication link, she could see the stress in his posture, but there was something else there now, something that might have been excitement. Admiral Santos, I have just received reports from the Galactic Council's Strategic Analysis Division. The swarm's expansion has not only stopped, but they appear to be consolidating their forces and adopting defensive positions. Elena felt her heart rate increase. Admiral, are you saying they're going from offense to defense? That is exactly what I am saying. For the first time since this war began, the enemy is reacting to our initiatives rather than forcing us to react to theirs. What does the Council make of this development? Admiral Kethler's expression shifted to something Elena recognized as bemused. Admiral Santos, the Council is struggling to understand how your forces have achieved strategic objectives that our finest military minds declared impossible. I have been asked to request a full briefing on human tactical doctrine. Elena paused, considering how to explain something that she wasn't sure could be explained. Admiral, I'm not sure human tactical doctrine can be briefed in any way that would make sense to galactic military thinking. Admiral Santos, I have spent the last month watching your people achieve victories that violate every principle of warfare I learned in 3 centuries of military service. At this point, I am prepared to entertain explanations that make no sense. Elena smiled. Admiral, the thing you have to understand is that humans don't really have a doctrine. We have principles, but we don't follow them when they don't work. Admiral, every military organization has doctrine. Otherwise, how do you coordinate large-scale operations? We coordinate by telling everyone the objective and letting them figure out the best way to achieve it. Then we support whatever they're trying to do, even if it seems crazy. Admiral Kethler was quiet for several moments. Admiral Santos, you are describing organized chaos. Admiral, that's exactly what we're describing. The difference is that we've gotten very good at making chaos work for us instead of against us. Elena called up a tactical display showing the current disposition of human-led forces across the 17 active fronts. Admiral, look at this pattern. Every human commander is doing something different. Rodriguez is using massed assault tactics. Mitchell is focusing on technological innovation. Commander Patel in the Sirius sector is trying pure mobility warfare. None of them are coordinating their approaches. But Admiral, without coordination, how do you achieve strategic coherence? We don't, Admiral. That's the point. The swarm can't predict our strategy because we don't have one. We have 17 different strategies being executed simultaneously by commanders who are making decisions based on their individual assessments of local conditions. Admiral Kethler studied the display for a long time. Admiral Santos, this approach should result in catastrophic failure. Under normal circumstances, yes. But these aren't normal circumstances. We're facing an enemy that adapts to conventional approaches. So we're using unconventional approaches. Lots of them all at once, without any central coordination that the enemy could analyze and counter. Admiral Santos, what you are describing is not military strategy. It is. Admiral Kethler paused, searching for words. It is evolution in real time. Elena felt a sudden understanding. Admiral, that's exactly what it is. We're not trying to perfect a strategy. We're trying to evolve faster than the enemy can adapt. The implications hit both admirals simultaneously. Traditional galactic warfare assumed that perfect strategy, perfectly executed, would achieve victory. Human warfare assumed that any strategy, no matter how perfect, would eventually be countered. So the key was to constantly develop new strategies faster than the enemy could develop countermeasures. Admiral Santos, Admiral Kethler said slowly, I believe I am beginning to understand why the Council's greatest strategic minds were unable to defeat the swarm. Admirals, we were trying to find the perfect solution. You are creating an infinite number of imperfect solutions that work because there are too many to counter. Elena nodded. Admiral, every human commander out there is doing exactly what they think will work best in their specific situation. Most of their ideas are probably wrong, but some of them are right, and the enemy can't predict which ones because we don't know which ones ourselves until we try them. Admiral Santos, this conversation has been more strategically valuable than the previous year of council meetings. I have one final question. Admirals, how do we scale this approach? How do we train galactic forces to think like humans? Elena considered the question carefully. Admiral, you can't train someone to think chaotically, but you can train them to trust chaos. You can teach galactic commanders to support whatever their subordinates are trying, even when it doesn't make sense. You can teach them to value initiative over optimization. And if the subordinates make wrong decisions? Elena grinned. Then they'll fail, learn from it, and try something else. Admiral, the beautiful thing about evolution is that it doesn't require perfection. It just requires survival and adaptation. Admiral Santos, I believe the Galactic Council needs to have a very different conversation about the future of this war. After Admiral Kethler disconnected, Elena remained at her command station, studying the tactical displays. For the first time since joining the Galactic Defense Force, she felt genuine optimism about their chances. The swarm had spent millennia perfecting their adaptation algorithms, becoming the ultimate counter to logical, predictable warfare. But they had never encountered an enemy that specialized in being illogical and unpredictable. More importantly, they had never faced an enemy that considered adaptation to be more important than perfection. Captain Chen, Elena called to her tactical officer. Yes, Admiral. Send a message to all human commanders. Tell them the swarm has gone defensive, which means our chaotic approach is working. Tell them to keep doing whatever they're doing, but more so. Admiral, should I include any specific tactical guidance? Elena considered for a moment. Tell them that if what they're doing makes sense, they should try something that doesn't make sense. Tell them that the only wrong approach is a predictable approach. As Captain Chen transmitted her orders, Elena reflected on something that Admiral Kethler still didn't fully understand. The human forces weren't succeeding because they were chaotic. They were succeeding because they were adaptable. Chaos was just the tool they used to force constant adaptation. The swarm might have superior numbers, superior technology, and superior processing power. But they had one critical weakness that humanity was perfectly positioned to exploit. They had never learned to appreciate the strategic value of being completely, utterly, magnificently unpredictable. And unpredictability, Elena knew, was about to become the galaxy's most powerful weapon. The war room aboard the Galactic Council's flagship Eternal Harmony had never seen anything like the scene unfolding before its distinguished occupants. Representatives from 47 civilizations watched in stunned silence as Admiral Elena Santos presented battle reports that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. Chancellor Vex of the Crystal Communion spoke first, her prismatic form refracting the holographic displays into scattered rainbows. Admiral Santos, your casualty figures cannot be accurate. You report engaging swarm forces with a numerical disadvantage of 4-1 and achieving victory with only 18% losses. Elena stood calmly at the center of the chamber, surrounded by skeptical alien faces. 3 months of impossible victories had earned humanity a seat at the highest levels of galactic command, but acceptance was another matter entirely. Chancellor Vex, our numbers are completely accurate. However, I think the confusion arises from different definitions of victory. General Scalex of the Draconian Empire hissed his displeasure. Admiral, victory is victory. You either achieve your objectives or you do not. There are no different definitions. Elena smiled, recognizing the fundamental misunderstanding that had made this war nearly unwinnable for the galactic forces. General Scalex, respectfully, that's exactly the kind of thinking that the Swarm has learned to counter. She activated the central holographic display, showing the recent engagement in the Proxima system. When my forces engaged the Swarm here, our tactical objective was to prevent them from establishing a forward base. Your strategic doctrine would define victory as completing that objective with minimal casualties and maximum efficiency. The display shifted, showing the actual battle sequence. What we did instead was turn the engagement into a learning experience. We deliberately tried 17 different tactical approaches during the same battle. 12 of them failed spectacularly. 5 of them worked better than expected. Admiral Kethler leaned forward, his multiple eyes focused intently on the display. Admiral Santos, you purposefully accepted failures. Admiral Kethler, we purposefully created failures. Each failure taught us something about how the Swarm adapts. More importantly, each failure forced the Swarm to reveal how they adapt. Elena manipulated the display controls, highlighting specific moments in the battle. Here, Captain Rodriguez tried a massed frontal assault. It failed, but the Swarm's counter-adaptation revealed vulnerabilities in their defensive algorithms. Here, Captain Mitchell attempted a flanking maneuver using modified weapons configurations. It also failed, but we learned that their adaptation speed decreases when facing multiple simultaneous modifications. The chamber erupted in translated voices as representatives struggled to process the concept. Commander Yathara of the Aquatic Republics raised a tentacled appendage for silence. Admiral Santos, you are describing a strategy that deliberately accepts tactical failures to achieve strategic intelligence. This violates every principle of resource conservation. Elena nodded. Commander Yathara, it absolutely does, but resource conservation is only valuable if you survive long enough to benefit from it. She changed the display again, showing comparative casualty figures across all active fronts. Before human forces joined the galactic defense, you were losing an average of 73% of engaged vessels per encounter. You were achieving strategic delays measured in days at the cost of entire fleets. The numbers spoke for themselves. Since human forces had taken command of active operations, casualty rates had dropped to an average of 26% per engagement, while strategic objectives were being achieved in hours instead of weeks. The difference, Elena continued, is that we stopped trying to fight perfectly and started trying to learn faster than the enemy could adapt. Shard General Kirix of the Crystal Communion interrupted. Admiral Santos, learning requires time for analysis and implementation. How do you learn faster than an enemy that processes information at quantum speeds? Elena's smile broadened. This was the question she had been hopping for. Shard General, you learn faster by learning differently. The Swarm processes information quickly, but they process it logically. They identify patterns, develop countermeasures, and implement solutions. It's incredibly efficient. She paused for effect, but it only works if your enemy provides consistent patterns to analyze. The display shifted to show real-time tactical feeds from current engagements across 12 different star systems. Each screen showed human commanders making decisions that defied logical analysis. Right now, Commander Park in the Vega system is using her destroyer's engines as improvised weapons, ramming swarm vessels at sublight speeds. It's tactically insane and violates every principle of ship preservation. But the swarm has no adaptation protocol for kamikaze attacks, because no logical species would sacrifice expensive vessels for minimal tactical gain. Another screen showed Captain Williams coordinating a battle where human ships were flying in chaotic formations that seemed designed to maximize vulnerability. Here, Captain Williams is deliberately exposing his ships to enemy fire to test different combinations of defensive modifications. Half his fleet should be destroyed by now. Alina highlighted the actual casualty figures. Instead, he's achieved 73% effectiveness while losing only 4 vessels. The swarm can't target what they can't predict, and they can't predict formations that change randomly every 30 seconds. Chancellor Vex's crystalline form flickered with complex light patterns. Admiral Santos, what you describe is not strategy, it is controlled madness. Chancellor, that's exactly what it is. Controlled madness implemented by people who specialize in making madness work. Alina turned to address the entire assembly. Honored delegates, for 3 months you have watched human forces achieve impossible victories using methods that violate every principle of advanced warfare. I understand your skepticism, but I need you to understand something critical about my species. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Humans didn't evolve to be logical, we evolved to survive. Everything else, technology, strategy, civilization itself, we built around that one fundamental drive. When survival is at stake, we don't calculate optimal solutions. We try everything until something works. Admiral Kethler spoke into the silence that followed. Admiral Santos, the Galactic Council has asked me to present you with a proposal. Alina felt her heart rate increase. This was the moment that would determine whether humanity's partnership with the galaxy would continue or whether Earth would face the swarm alone. The Council has voted to offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Federation, along with immediate access to all Federation technologies and resources. Alina kept her expression neutral despite the magnitude of the offer. Full membership would advance human civilization by millennia in a matter of years. What would the Council require in return? Admiral Santos, the Council requests that humanity assume primary command authority for all military operations against the Void Swarm. The chamber fell completely silent. Alina realized that she was being offered the greatest opportunity and responsibility in human history. Admiral Kethler, I need to be certain I understand what you're proposing. You want humans to command fleets from civilizations that have existed for millennia, using technologies we couldn't build ourselves, in a war for the survival of the galaxy. Admiral Santos, we want humans to do what you have been doing, but on a scale that can end this war. Alina looked around the chamber at faces that represented the accumulated wisdom and experience of advanced civilizations spanning thousands of years. 3 months ago, these beings had considered humanity too primitive for contact. Now they were offering to place the fate of everything under human command. Admiral Kethler, I accept on behalf of humanity, with one condition. Admirals, we do this our way. No optimization requirements, no efficiency mandates, no logical constraints on tactical decisions. Human commanders will have complete authority to implement whatever strategies they believe will work, no matter how insane they appear to galactic military doctrine. Chancellor Vex spoke carefully. Admiral Santos, you are asking us to trust the survival of our civilizations to strategies we cannot understand, executed by beings whose thinking processes appear random to our analysis. Alina nodded solemnly. Chancellor, that's exactly what I'm asking, because random thinking is the only thing the swarm hasn't learned to counter. The vote was closer than Alina had expected. 24 civilizations voted in favor, 21 voted against, and 2 abstained. But it was enough. Admiral Kethler approached Alina as the chamber emptied. Admiral Santos, I must ask you something in confidence. Admirals, do you truly believe that human tactical approaches can defeat an enemy that has consumed 47 star systems? Alina considered the question seriously. Admiral Kethler, I believe that human tactical approaches are the only thing that hasn't been tried. Everything else has failed. Sometimes the only option left is the one that shouldn't work. Admiral Santos, you are asking me to bet the existence of my civilization on approaches that shouldn't work. Alina met his gaze steadily. Admiral, you're betting on us because the approaches that should work have already failed. Admiral Kethler was quiet for a long moment. Admiral Santos, there is something else. Our intelligence reports indicate that the swarm has begun modifying their own tactical approaches. They appear to be abandoning their adaptation algorithms in favor of more aggressive strategies. Alina felt a chill. Admiral, are you saying they're learning from us? Admiral Santos, I am saying that your success has forced them to evolve. The question is whether you can evolve faster than they can. That night in her quarters aboard Terra's Fury, Alina stared out at the stars and contemplated the magnitude of what humanity had just undertaken. In accepting command of the Galactic Defense Force, she had committed her species to a war that would determine whether civilization survived or whether the galaxy became a lifeless wasteland. But more than that, she had committed humanity to proving that chaos could triumph over order, that adaptation could defeat perfection, and that sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all. Her communication terminal chimed with incoming messages from human commanders across 17 star systems. Each message contained the same request: permission to implement tactical approaches that violated every principle of military science. Alina smiled as she authorized each request. Tomorrow would bring the largest coordinated human operation in galactic history, an assault on the swarm's primary staging area using tactics so chaotic that even she couldn't predict the outcome. It was exactly the kind of impossible plan that humans specialized in making work. Her final message that night went to Admiral Kethler. Admiral, recommend all galactic forces stand by for Operation Pandemonium. Execution begins at 800 Galactic Standard Time. Warning, this operation will appear to be complete tactical insanity. That's intentional. Admiral Kethler's response came back within minutes. Admiral Santos, I am beginning to understand that tactical insanity may be humanity's greatest strategic advantage. The Galactic Fleet stands ready to support whatever impossible plan you have devised. Alina leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of galactic civilization resting on humanity's shoulders. Tomorrow would prove whether chaos could defeat the ultimate order, whether unpredictability could overcome perfect adaptation, and whether a species that specialized in doing the impossible could save a galaxy that had forgotten how to attempt it. But tonight, for the first time since the war began, Alina Santos felt something that no galactic commander had experienced in months: confidence that the impossible might just be possible enough. After all, impossible was just another way of saying that nobody had figured out how to do it yet. And humans specialized in being the first to figure out things that couldn't be done. Operation Pandemonium began at exactly 800 Galactic Standard Time with what appeared to be the complete breakdown of military discipline across 17 star systems. To observers monitoring galactic defense communications, it seemed as though every human commander had simultaneously lost their minds. In the Kepler sector, Colonel Rodriguez launched his entire fleet directly into the heart of the swarm's strongest defensive position with no apparent strategy beyond. Hit them hard and see what happens. His ships flew in formations that seemed designed to maximize casualties rather than minimize them. In the Vega system, Captain Mitchell had disconnected her weapons targeting systems and was firing manually, using patterns that changed every few seconds for no discernible tactical reason. Her engineering crew was modifying weapons configurations during active combat, turning precision instruments into improvised tools of destruction. In the Centauri front, Commander Patel had divided his forces into 17 separate groups, each pursuing different objectives simultaneously without any apparent coordination. Some groups were attacking, others were defending, and several appeared to be conducting scientific experiments in the middle of a battlefield. To the swarm's collective intelligence, monitoring these engagements from across the galaxy, the human forces appeared to be suffering from some kind of catastrophic command failure. Their adaptation algorithms, designed to counter logical military strategies, found themselves facing something unprecedented: complete tactical chaos. But aboard Terra's Fury, Admiral Elena Santos watched the operation unfold with growing satisfaction. What appeared to be chaos was actually the most sophisticated strategy humanity had ever implemented. "Admiral," reported Captain Chen, "we're receiving real-time data from all 17 fronts. The swarm forces are showing unprecedented confusion patterns." Elena studied the tactical displays surrounding her command station. Each screen showed a different aspect of the coordinated chaos her commanders were unleashing. "Captain, show me the swarm's adaptation responses." The holographic display shifted to show enemy behavioral patterns. For the first time since the war began, the swarm's responses showed hesitation, uncertainty, and most importantly, delays in their adaptation cycles. "They can't process what we're doing fast enough to counter it," Elena observed with satisfaction. "Captain Chen, signal all human commanders. Tell them to increase the chaos level by 50%. What followed over the next 6 hours challenged every assumption about modern warfare. Human forces abandoned formations entirely, with individual ships pursuing personal initiatives that seemed to contradict their own fleet's objectives. Weapons were used in combinations that reduced their effectiveness, but created results that no enemy could predict. Ships performed maneuvers that violated basic principles of physics until they suddenly worked in ways that physics couldn't explain. The breakthrough came in the Proxima system, where Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim was commanding a single destroyer against a swarm defensive grid that should have vaporized her vessel in minutes. Instead of retreating or calling for reinforcement, Kim had begun broadcasting human music at the enemy formations while performing acrobatic maneuvers that turned her ship into what she called the galaxy's most heavily armed dance partner. "Commander Kim," her Zenthari tactical officer protested, "this approach serves no military purpose." "Exactly," Kim replied, executing a barrel roll that brought her ship within weapons range of 3 enemy vessels. "That's what makes it perfect." She opened fire while spinning, creating weapons patterns that followed the rhythm of the music she was broadcasting. The swarm's targeting systems, designed to predict logical movement patterns, found themselves trying to track a ship that was essentially dancing through 3-dimensional space. Within an hour, Kim had destroyed 17 enemy vessels and disabled their defensive grid, all while maintaining a running commentary about the musical qualities of various weapons combinations. "Terra's Fury, this is Dancing Death," she reported, using her ship's new call sign. "Proxima defensive grid is down, and I've discovered that plasma cannons make excellent percussion instruments when fired in triplet patterns." Similar reports came in from across all 17 fronts. Human commanders were achieving impossible objectives using methods that their own crews couldn't understand, much less the enemy. In the Vega system, Captain Mitchell had turned her engagement into a live-fire engineering experiment, testing 43 different weapon modifications while destroying everything that got in her way. "Terra's Fury, this is experimental fury. I've accidentally discovered 7 new ways to break physics, and the enemy seems to find them really upsetting." In the Kepler sector, Colonel Rodriguez had transformed his suicidal frontal assault into a philosophical statement about the nature of courage. "Terra's Fury, this is unstoppable force. The enemy appears to be having an existential crisis about whether they can stop something that refuses to be stopped." But the most significant development came from the intelligence analysis being conducted by Dr. Amanda Torres, the physicist who had modified alien defensive systems into offensive weapons. "Admiral Santos," she reported from her laboratory aboard Terra's Fury, "I've been monitoring the swarm's communication patterns during the engagement. They're exhibiting something I've never seen before." Elena looked up from her tactical displays. "Dr. Torres, what exactly are you seeing?" "Admiral, the swarm appears to be arguing with itself." Elena felt her pulse quicken. "Explain." "Their collective intelligence is designed for consensus through logical analysis. But when they can't find logical patterns to analyze, different nodes are reaching different conclusions about optimal responses. For the first time in recorded observations, the swarm is experiencing internal disagreement." Elena stared at the implications. "Dr. Torres, are you saying that chaos is causing their hive mind to fragment?" "Admiral, I'm saying that unpredictability is forcing them to develop individual opinions, and individual opinions are incompatible with collective consciousness." The revelation changed everything. Alina immediately opened channels to all human commanders. All vessels, this is Admiral Santos. Priority override. New intelligence indicates that our chaotic approach is causing structural damage to the swarm's collective intelligence. Increase chaos protocols to maximum levels. Repeat, maximize chaos protocols immediately. What happened next became known in galactic military history as the Hour of Beautiful Madness. Across 17 star systems, human forces abandoned every remaining vestige of conventional tactics. Ships began communicating with the enemy, offering running commentary on their tactical choices. Weapons were fired in patterns that spelled out words in various human languages. Formations were arranged to create artistic patterns that had no military value but were aesthetically pleasing. Captain Williams, commanding a battle group in the Tau Ceti system, began his attack by broadcasting a lecture on human philosophy while his ships arranged themselves into the shape of Earth's solar system. "Attention, swarm forces," he announced over all channels. "Today's topic is why existence is preferable to non-existence, a human perspective." Commander Park, leading forces in the Wolf 359 system, had her ships perform synchronized combat maneuvers while broadcasting human sports commentary. And Park takes her ships into the enemy formation. What a beautiful tactical pirouette. The crowd goes wild. Lieutenant Commander Johnson, commanding a frigate squadron in the Barnard star system, was conducting his engagement as if it were a cooking show. "First, we add a dash of plasma fire to taste. Now we'll fold in some missile salvos. Be careful not to overmix or you'll ruin the consistency of the enemy formation." To external observers, the human forces appeared to have suffered a complete psychological breakdown. To the swarm's collective intelligence, these tactics were beyond incomprehensible. They were impossible to process within any framework of logical analysis. The effect was catastrophic for the enemy. Across all 17 fronts, swarm forces began exhibiting behaviors that their own programming couldn't explain. Individual units started making independent decisions. Coordination broke down as different nodes reached contradictory conclusions about how to respond to tactics that made no sense. The first swarm surrender in galactic history occurred in the Sirius system, where a collective node simply stopped functioning rather than continue trying to process Captain Rodriguez's philosophical assault on the nature of military logic. "Terra's fury, this is unstoppable force," Rodriguez reported with evident amazement. "The enemy I think they've given up. They're just floating there, not responding to anything." Similar reports came from across the operational theater. Swarm forces were abandoning positions, retreating without tactical justification, or simply shutting down entirely when faced with human tactics that violated their fundamental understanding of cause and effect. Admiral Alina Santos found herself commanding the most successful military operation in galactic history, using strategies that would have gotten her court-martialed if they hadn't worked so impossibly well. "Admiral," reported Captain Chen, "we're receiving communications from Admiral Kethler and the Galactic Council. They're requesting immediate clarification of our tactical status." Alina activated the communication link, and Admiral Kethler's holographic image appeared, his expression a mixture of awe and bewilderment. "Admiral Santos, our monitoring stations report that swarm forces across all 17 systems have either retreated, surrendered, or simply ceased functioning. Our analysis divisions are unable to determine how this result was achieved." Alina smiled. "Admiral Kethler, we achieved victory by refusing to try to achieve victory." "Admiral Santos, that statement makes no logical sense." "Admiral, that's exactly the point. Logic is what the swarm understood. We won by being thoroughly, completely, magnificently illogical." Alina gestured to her tactical displays, showing the aftermath of Operation Pandemonium. "Admiral, the swarm's collective intelligence was designed to adapt to rational threats. When they encountered irrational threats, their adaptation protocols broke down. When the protocols broke down, their collective consciousness fragmented. When their consciousness fragmented, they lost the ability to function as a unified force." Admiral Kethler was quiet for a long moment. "Admiral Santos, you are saying that you defeated an enemy that has consumed 47 star systems by confusing them." "Admiral, we defeated them by being so unpredictably human that their entire worldview couldn't process what we were doing." The implications were staggering. For the first time in the war, the swarm was retreating on all fronts. Their adaptation algorithms, perfected over millennia of conquest, had proven useless against an enemy that specialized in doing things that couldn't be understood until after they worked. Admiral Santos, Admiral Kethler continued, the Galactic Council has asked me to convey their official position regarding humanity's role in the galactic community. Elena felt her heart rate increase. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future among the stars. The Council wishes to formally apologize for centuries of prejudicial assessment regarding your species' capabilities. Furthermore, they have voted unanimously to establish the Human Tactical Innovation Division as a permanent component of galactic defense forces. Elena raised an eyebrow. Admiral, what exactly would this division do? Admiral Santos, whenever the galaxy faces threats that cannot be resolved through conventional means, we would like humans to apply their specialized expertise in impossible solutions. Elena laughed, understanding that humanity had just been officially designated as the galaxy's problem solvers for situations too chaotic for logical minds to handle. Admiral Kethler, on behalf of humanity, I accept. But I should warn you, we specialize in solutions that shouldn't work but do. If you want predictable results, we're definitely the wrong species for the job. Admiral Santos, we have spent 3 months watching your people achieve impossible victories through unpredictable methods. At this point, unpredictable is exactly what the galaxy needs. As the communication link closed, Elena looked around her bridge at the human and alien crew members who had somehow made chaos into the most effective military strategy in galactic history. Captain Chen, she said finally, signal all human forces. Operation Pandemonium is concluded. Tell them they've just saved the galaxy by proving that sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to approach it in an impossible way. Elena leaned back in her command chair, reflecting on the events that had brought humanity from a quarantined primitive species to the saviors of galactic civilization. The Void Swarm had been perfect predators, perfectly adapted to defeat perfect strategies executed by perfect civilizations. They had conquered dozens of star systems because they understood how logic worked and how to counter it. But they had never encountered humans. And humans, Elena realized with satisfaction, had built their entire civilization on the principle that perfection was boring, logic was optional, and the impossible was just another word for nobody's figured out how to do it yet. 3 months ago, defeat had been certain. The galaxy's greatest minds had calculated the odds and found no hope. Today, victory was complete, not because humanity had found better strategies, but because they had found strategies so incomprehensibly chaotic that the enemy couldn't process them. Elena smiled as she composed her final report to the Galactic Council. She would tell them that humanity was honored to serve as the galaxy's specialists in impossible solutions. She would tell them that humans were prepared to face whatever threats emerged in the future. But most importantly, she would tell them that they never had to face extinction alone again. Because somewhere in the galaxy, 8 billion humans were ready to prove that any problem could be solved if you were willing to approach it in a way that made absolutely no sense to anyone except the people crazy enough to try it. And in a galaxy full of logical, predictable, perfectly rational civilizations, sometimes being magnificently crazy was exactly what the universe needed.